Hey everybody, I'm Reagan, and you're listening to Just Weird Crap, a podcast where I talk about all the most wacky, weird, and unexplainable mysteries that go on in our world. Hey everybody, welcome to Just Weird Crap. I hope you're having a wonderful day. This episode is gonna be a little bit different from the norm, and the reason is, we normally cover kind of spooky, unsolved disappearances, weird mysteries, things that have no explanation. But today I want to talk about something that is basically the opposite of all of those things. It's going to be kind of a debunking episode, I guess you could say. And since it's not like a mystery that, there's like a rabbit hole that I fell down or anything, it might be a little bit shorter than usual, but we'll see, because there's still a lot of cool history in this story, and I may end up yapping for a while. But that's enough off-topic yapping. And today I'll be talking about the Winchester Mystery House, and by extension, its kind of infamous owner, Sarah Winchester. So before I go any further, I think it would be right to introduce you to Sarah Winchester, give you a little bit of a crash biography. She was born Sarah Pardee in 1839 or 1840 in New Haven, Connecticut, to wealthy upper-class parents. She was very academically gifted. She learned 4 different languages. She was interested in music and writing and reading and a bunch of different things. She married William Winchester in 1862, who was also from New Haven, and he would one day become the heir of Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the maker of the rather famous Winchester rifle you see in all like the westerns, and it's what Annie Oakley shot, and they called it the gun that won the West. In 1866, Sarah gave birth to her only child, a daughter named Annie, who tragically passed away just weeks after she was born. And she had no more children after that. In 1881, William Winchester passed away from tuberculosis and left his huge fortune to Sarah. His mother also died soon after that, leaving an additional inheritance to Sarah. After these losses and the death of her mother the year previously, Sarah decided to move west to the San Francisco Bay Area of California. And this was upon her doctor's recommendation, because her health, he thought, would be helped by the warmer climate. After the death of her oldest sister, Sarah convinced some of her remaining sisters to move west with her, and when they did, she provided housing and financial support for them for her whole life. In 1886, Sarah purchased an 8-room farmhouse in San Jose, California, and she named it Llanada Villa, after Llanada, Spain, where she had once vacationed with her husband. Sarah's original plan had been to build a house on her newly acquired property that was big enough to have her entire family move into, the ones that had moved with her. But there was several practical reasons it just never really worked out that way. Her niece did move in with her later down the line, but she was the only family member that ever lived with Sarah in this house. So here basically begins the story of this bizarre, rambling house that would later be known as the Winchester Mystery House. Now, if you're familiar with the Winchester house, you've probably heard some stories. Its quirks are very quirky. They're numerous. Doors and staircases that lead to walls or ceilings, and sheer drops that you just open the door and there's just nothing below you. There's trapdoors and barred windows inside the house, and a weirdly obsessive incorporation of the number 13 all throughout the design of the house, and of course the overall labyrinthine layout of the house that you could easily get lost in. If you take a surface look at the history of the house and its owner, you will no doubt come across story after story of a superstitious heiress who manically built onto her mansion due to a combination of paranoia and guilt and a little bit of superstition. At least that's what I heard for my entire childhood, growing up just minutes away from the property, and the same tale was spun to me when I toured the house when I was a kid. The story usually goes something like this. After the death of her husband, Sarah Winchester visited a medium who told her that the spirits of all those killed by Winchester rifles would haunt her if she did not appease them by building them a home, and she must never cease construction on this home or she would die. The maze-like layout and the oddities of the house were supposed to have been built to confuse these spirits so that they couldn't get to her easily. You'll likely hear about how Sarah held regular seances in this specific room of her house to consult with spirits about her construction plans. And you might also hear that the construction on the house never stopped once during Sarah's lifetime, that the mansion was worked on for 38 years straight, around the clock, without a single pause. And you will definitely hear that it's totally haunted. All of these stories have made the Winchester Mystery House into one of the country's most popular destinations for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts. And if you tour the house, you'll hear the stories repeated, maybe with the addition of a spooky experience the tour guide had there, or a recent ghostly occurrence in the house. Now that I've given a crash course on Sarah Winchester and Llanada Villa, let me share with you the information that recently rocked my world. It's all a flippin' lie. It's all a lie. I wish I was being dramatic, but I'm not. Genuinely, there is zero evidence of any of those things being true. And all of the information that we have about Sarah Winchester and the house and its construction totally contradicts the popular narrative around the house and around Sarah. All of the quirks of Sarah and the house she built are easily explained, and even the wilder claims about like her sanity and the house's history have been completely debunked. It's genuinely all a lie. The rumors began when Sarah was still alive. Locals kind of viewed her as somewhat of an eccentric recluse, and while it's true that she did spend most of her time inside the house, that was because she suffered from rheumatoid arthritis very severely, especially in the later years of her life, and it was hard for her to get around. Not being out and about, it was that much easier for people to get curious and start making things up about her and spreading rumors. But for Sarah, everything she needed, she had at home, and she had plenty to keep her occupied. And by that, I mean her, home improvement projects, I guess we could call them. But the thing is, rather than being fascinated by the occult, Sarah was in reality fascinated by architecture. She attended expositions to garner inspiration for her house and was subscribed to architectural design journals. Dissatisfied with the several architects she hired, Sarah decided to head up her renovation herself. While she certainly appears to have been passionate about architectural design, Sarah seemed not to care much about having any sort of an overall plan or goal for her house, and preferred to just work room by room and change her plans as she went along. She was meticulous, though, about her projects being to her liking, and she was known to demolish and reconstruct an area numerous times if she was not satisfied with the results. Sometimes she would just abandon a section of the house entirely if she didn't like the way it was turning out, and she'd just move on to another room, leaving projects completely unfinished. Not the best way to go about a construction project. Sarah's overall lack of a plan for her home additions and improvements led to some eccentricities in the design. Without a floor plan, the layout of the house became maze-like, and construction just kind of kept going. Just stretched on for years, which only fed rumors that were being spread about her. Because people are just like, why is this house still being worked on? It's been a really long time. Local papers began to paint her as a paranoid recluse who supposedly thought she would die if she ever stopped working on her house, if she ever stopped construction, which is the rumor that is still being repeated today. But in fact, there were periods of time that often lasted for months when the house was not being worked on at all. And rather than being driven by fear or superstition, Sarah most likely kept renovating so long just because the house was kind of a passion project, like the ultimate DIY for her. She had an interest in architecture and she had the funds, so she just kept adding to the house because she could. Another motivator might have been that she wanted to keep local craftsmen employed, and she did not seem to be stingy at all with her wealth. As far as her obsession with the number 13 goes, it really seemed to be nothing more than just a harmless quirk that was her favorite number, so she incorporated it into the house design, which really, it's kind of made into a little bit more than what it actually is. If I was rich and building a house and I had a favorite number, I'd probably put it in there too. So I think that it's been made a lot of. They've attached like a superstitious meaning to it. I guess when I don't think there really was that serious of a thought behind it. It was just, again, she did so she could. That's kind of the general feeling of the house, is it's not weird because of paranoia. It's weird just because a really rich lady had a lot of time on her hands to work on her project. The work on Llanada Villa ceased for good, though, shortly after the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The earthquake is a big player in some of the weirder features of the house. Serious damage was done as a result of the quake. There were multiple chimneys caved in, as well as one of the towers. Balconies just fell off and crumbled, and the top floors of the house collapsed. While some minor repairs were done to the home, the damaged areas were never rebuilt. Thus, many areas of the house were just closed off. And doors and staircases that had previously led to other parts of the house were rendered useless, leading nowhere. A door that had previously opened to a balcony now opens to nothing but empty air and a several-story drop. After so much of Llanada Villa was destroyed by the earthquake, Sarah, in declining health, permanently halted work on the home. And by 1910, she'd moved to another property she owned, and she shifted her focus from her spontaneous construction projects to investing her fortune, instead of using it to fuel her home improvements. She was very successful with her investing, and everyone who knew her really admired her business savvy. She was very sharp. And the claims of her being superstitious and paranoid, and maybe even insane, well, the people who knew her said otherwise. Neither her friends, relatives, or employees ever even intimated that Sarah had a superstitious bone in her body. In fact, they all described her as kind, intelligent, and incredibly clear-headed. She was a Red Cross member. She supported political and environmental causes during a time in history where women weren't even allowed to vote. She provided for her family until her passing in 1922. A philanthropist even in death, Sarah bequeathed her fortune to several of her employees, her surviving family members, and to the William Wirt Winchester Hospital, which originally was just the tubercular ward of a hospital in New Haven, to which she had been anonymously donating an amount that totaled over $1 million over the span of a decade. In a state of dilapidation, Llanada Village was sold at auction after Sarah's death, and within a year had been turned into a tourist attraction. The new owners took the rumors that had been circulating about Sarah and ran with them, creating the sensationalized narrative that is still popular today. The supposed haunting of the house is undoubtedly a result of confirmation bias, as every paranormal event someone has reported has either been debunked or it's so vague that calling it paranormal is a stretch. It's tragic to me that the remarkable legacy of Sarah Winchester has been completely trampled on in the name of profit. And even more tragic that I grew up within minutes of the Winchester Mystery House, walked through its rooms, and was never told its real history. Everyone I knew grew up believing the same tall tales we'd all been fed, and no one was the wiser. What is simply a stunningly beautiful and unique mansion built by a creative and intelligent woman has been turned into a circus, and the lies about Sarah Winchester are still being repeated a century after her death. That is why I felt the need to make this episode. I could never, in good conscience, do an episode about the Winchester Mystery House that wasn't based in the truth. To wrap this up, I strongly encourage you to read up about who Sarah Winchester really was, and about the fascinating and beautiful house she designed, and if you ever get the opportunity to tour it, I highly recommend doing so. Just take what you may hear about it with a whole box of salt. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Just Weird Crap. Please remember to follow us on Instagram and Spotify, and give us a 5-star rating so we can keep bringing you more weird content in the future. Stay curious, fellow weirdos.